Margaret, thank you for that introduction. And it's been a pleasure to be here already listening to the many great presentations today. So hopefully I can contribute something useful in the area of web accessibility. This is a critical aspect of the environment in which people with disabilities live and work and enjoy life, and also as we age. What is the web now? It's access to the world. It's essential for news, information, online learning, employment, civic participation, healthcare, social networking, entertainment, and more. It's also the space in which most of our digital technologies are converging. And so it's a very rich environment in which to look at the accessibility challenges, develop the accessibility solutions, implement them, and make sure everyone has access to those. Okay, excuse me. Okay, is that still working in terms of hearing me? Thank you, all set. So maintaining accessibility across all of these web environments is essential for healthy aging, whether or not an individual is newly acquiring a disability or experiencing changes to existing disabilities. And particularly for health-related services, it's essential. You don't want to shut anyone out. We talk in the web accessibility field a lot about the business case for web accessibility. And in that, we look at several different areas, including social responsibility, technical carryover benefits. There are many benefits from doing web accessibility that also help people without disabilities. There are long-term financial benefits. If you're building in an accessible way, it also means you're building to web standards that's more efficient from an organizational perspective going forward. It's also required. I'm often working in an international environment. In the US, we have many laws which require accessibility of information technologies from different directions. And also, one of the speakers this morning talked about expectations. We're living in a generation where there's a history of the independent living movement. There's a history of disability rights. People expect mainstream technology to be accessible. They have high expectations for that. They expect engagement, and they expect seamless accessibility when their activities move into an area where there's more healthcare implications. Universal design is a key aspect of web accessibility. It's, if you look at Ron Mace's definition of this field, it includes the design of products and environments to be usable by all people to the greatest extent possible without the need for adaptation or specialized design. And it also includes a concept of broadly defining the user. So one of the things we've tried to do in web accessibility is to ensure that people who are engineers in the web technology field understand that users are not some small concept of a central norm and that no one else matters. Everybody matters in that space when it comes to design. Compatibility and interoperability with assistive technology is also a critical part of making web accessibility work. And one of the ways I think of the relationship between universal design and assistive technology is universal design is there for everyone. And over time, what you can do with universal design expands, and what you need to do with assistive technology moves out further and further. And so you get to do some of the fun stuff. You get to think about brainwave interface with some of the mainstream technologies, but that's all part of a framework of how universal design fits with assistive technology. At the World Wide Web Consortium, this is the international standards organization for the web. It's a community of many different parties who come together from around the world to build web standards. It encompasses an expanding range of technology because the broadcast industry is moving onto the web. Digital publishing is moving onto the web. Entertainment and gaming is moving onto the web. Social networking started on the web, and that's a key part of many of our lives now. W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium, is hosted by the Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Lab at MIT. We're also hosted for Europe by the European Research Consortium on Informatics and Mathematics and by Keio University in Japan. One of the four main technical divisions of W3C is the Web Accessibility Initiative. In the Web Accessibility Initiative, we have multiple layers of work to support web accessibility, and that includes ensuring accessibility support in all of the technologies W3C designs. When I say web technology, I mean, for instance, HTML, which is a familiar term, I think, to everyone in the room. And then there's another 100 or so other technical specifications that are running on the web when you're using the web. There's style sheets, there's geolocation, there's things for interaction, there's things for privacy. Excuse me, there's a whole host of different standards. And one of my jobs is to look across all of those areas and ensure that our working groups are doing so to identify any potential accessibility barriers and address those before the standards are finalized and out there for everyone to use. We also develop guidelines and standards for different aspects of web accessibility. We develop resources to help with evaluation of web accessibility. We develop education and outreach resources to help explain, increase awareness, and support implementation of web accessibility. We coordinate with research. We have a series of web symposia on different advanced topics and technology design with regard to their accessibility implications. And we've spent a great deal of time over the past decade on standards harmonization. A lot of people hear about web accessibility. They think this is a great idea. Let's write our own web accessibility guidelines. That actually slows the field down, because if you use the same set of international standards, you get an economy of scale. You have the software developers developing to a unified standard, and accelerates the progress of the tools that can make it easier for everyone to do accessibility. Some of the core principles in how we do our work is to have a multi-stakeholder approach to everything we do. So that includes getting industry together with the disability community, together with government, together with research. NIDR has been a leader in web accessibility for 15 years now, supporting the early work and continuing to help drive this work. Some of the key industry in the field, IBM and HP, for instance, have supported this. Other organizations have from time to time. But there's a backbone of support. The European Commission has been involved in helping support and drive some of this work. We use a consensus-based approach. So we do everything by consensus so that the solutions work for all of these different stakeholders. It's community responsive. In a single one of our guidelines, the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, we responded to several thousand comments. And then public comments, we have to address all of those individual comments. And it's an open process. It's transparent, so you can see the work we're doing. You can contribute to it, you can criticize it, and have a dialogue with us about it. To give some examples of web design requirements, just to add a little bit more concreteness to some of this, with regard to auditory needs, there may be a need for captioning if there's media on the web, for sign. There may be a need with regard to cognitive and neurological disabilities for consistent navigation. It makes it easier to learn your way from one part of a website to another. Makes it easier for everyone. Also, appropriate language level. Don't make the language more complex than is needed for the particular content in a place. Think about how the graphics are communicated. Be careful about flickering or strobing. You could trigger a seizure for somebody who's trying to use your website. Think about physical and speech needs. The keyboard doesn't work for everyone. Some people may be navigating by touch, by gesture, eye gaze, head, mouse, speech, or other input. Visual, you need to have interoperability with assistive technologies. You need descriptions for graphics and so forth. So you don't actually have to think of each one of those needs if you use our guidelines, which is what we want you to do. But we package these in a set of principles. The information should be perceivable, so that, for instance, you can have text alternatives for graphics. If you have time-based media, you should have either streaming captions or a transcript one can access, depending on the circumstances. The content should be adaptable. Maybe your user needs to enlarge greatly what the content is on your site. The content should be able to smoothly enlarge. Distinguishable, think about the contrast between foreground and background. Operable, you should be able to run it from a keyboard. If you can run something from a keyboard, it covers most other things. Give someone enough time to complete an interaction. Some people may take longer. There's provisions for navigability, avoiding seizure triggers, as I mentioned. There's provisions for understandability, readable, predictable, input assistance. Robust, the content should be presented in a way that's interoperable and compatible with assistive technologies that some people with disabilities may be using. So There is an ecosystem you can think of for web accessibility, most of which you don't have to worry about as long as we're doing the work that we're doing at W3C in partnership with people who want to help develop those web technologies around the world. But it includes universally designed technologies with interoperable APIs, application programming interfaces. It includes a motivational context so that people understand the need for accessibility and remember to do it and carry that through. It involves implementation support. We produce many kinds of educational resources. There are many excellent organizations who also produce educational resources on this. Training, demos, sample code. We try to hand people the solutions. Validation and conformance. Check your work to see if it's actually accessible. So if you think of the space for the web, you can think of content as the target that you're trying to help people reach. And this is regardless of what part of the healthcare system you're in or what part of the devices or service system, the back end where you may have people with disabilities working there as well. There's guidelines that inform that. There are guidelines that inform the production tools for accessibility, guidelines that inform the devices you may use. So this applies to a desktop computer where you're accessing the web or a mobile device. It applies across the whole space, media players and so forth. Accessibility of the technical foundation is also key, and that's the layer where we're in the background looking across all these evolving technologies. So I'll be quick through this in order to get to some comments that I have about how this web technology may fit within the field. But for web content accessibility guidelines, there's a stable international standard from 2008. It's there. You can use it throughout your work. It's also been endorsed by the International Standards Organization as well as W3C. And there's a framework within that that's actually forward compatible for technologies, web technologies we haven't even thought of yet, so that the normative layer is very stable and the techniques for newer technologies we can add to on a yearly basis at the informative layer. And we have, for instance, a WCAG2 quick reference that a developer can use. If you have a web developer in your organization, you can point them at this. They can customize it to the technologies you're actually using in your organization. For authoring tools, we're nearly completed with our second generation of those, and those address all kinds of authoring tools, including HTML editors, media tools, content management systems, blogging and wiki software, online learning systems. So these are highly adaptable across different types of production tools for web content. User agent accessibility guidelines, we also are working on our second generation of those. And with those, we're covering the whole traditional web space and paying particular attention because of popular demand to mobile accessibility. And so as with all of our guidelines, the relevance is there, but we're also building in implementation examples so that developers can say, this is how somebody would be using web accessibility on a device. So the question that came up this morning about, with a mobile phone, what if you can't do that swipe gesture? We're looking at those kinds of questions and trying to build in provisions for those. So one of the buzzwords right now, if you'd say at W3C, is the open web platform, which is where we tie together all of the current generation of web technologies, particularly HTML5, and to a combination of technologies you can use across any platform, across any device, mobile, tablet, traditional desktop, kiosks, and so forth. And a key piece of this is, this framework allows you to take accessibility as well as the modern web into all these different spaces, including healthcare, including digital entertainment, publishing, big data, mobile, software distribution, and so forth. So HTML5 is a key piece of this. It's the foundation of the open web platform. And we've been working very hard in the Web Accessibility Initiative to build accessibility in, and we have most of that built in. This actually went to candidate recommendation 2 days ago, which on Monday this week. So at W3C, that means that it's in a period of intense implementation testing. And in the Web Accessibility Initiative, we're continuing to add accessibility extensions to that Some of that will be reintegrated in HTML5, but they'll be present as part of the open web platform so that universal design of the open web platform is assured. There are certain specifications such as ARIA, accessible rich internet applications, Canvas, captioning, where we have looked at specific accessibility needs, built those in to be part of this whole package. And I'm just going to briefly mention these again so I can get to some comments. So accessible rich internet applications, this is to ensure that, for instance, the interactive menus, expandable, collapsible, drag and drop, all of those are accessibility supported, including for people who are using assistive technologies where interoperability is key. Independent user interfaces is a new specification that we're addressing to add additional capabilities for touch and gestural and speech interface to the web, especially for mobile devices. Media accessibility, there was a great deal of work over the past year and a half or so, including with the FCC's Video Programming Access Advisory Committee. It's one of the areas where where the field was not able to agree on a common format, so there's multiple standards, W3C time text, also WebVGT, and you end up with some problems with additional costs because of the interchange format has to convert to different standards in different situations. But we're trying to ensure interoperability at the W3C level. I will skip right now the detailed accessibility requirements for media, but I wanted to give a flavor of there's a great deal of granularity that we deal with at a technical level to make sure, for instance, that media works across all different disabilities. Mobile accessibility resources, this is an area where, for instance, all of our guidelines so far for accessibility address mobile, and there's more that we need to do. So we're pulling those together in new resources. But we actually have a page specifically on mobile with resources you can get from there. And also, as I mentioned before, we're adding in developer examples that they can look to there. Digital publishing is an area we're looking at now in partnership with the International Digital Publishing Forum, which produces the EPUB standard. As you know, most of your books are going online. Of course, people with disabilities want access to those as well. So the resources we have at the Web Accessibility Initiative are relevant for any of the work that people with disabilities, with high expectations for accessibility as they age, and people who have newly acquired disabilities because of aging want these kinds of accessibility supports. They want to take it for granted in their environment. They want mainstream built-in solutions. And the solutions are already largely here, although we need to continue researching to keep up with the new technologies coming on. So if you go to our website, you would find resources on getting started, designing for inclusion, guidelines and techniques, planning and implementing, evaluating presentations and tutorials, as well as working directly with us if you want to. We welcome that. One of the key things can be developing a project management plan for accessibility. So you have end-to-end accessibility throughout your organization, establishing responsibilities, doing an initial assessment, developing an organizational policy that points to the international standards, selecting carefully the authoring tools, the evaluation tools, providing training, monitoring what you're doing in terms of implementation. And we also have resources such as, stories of web users with different kinds of disabilities so that you can look at what the experience is and talk to your developers, your engineers about that. So from my perspective, for web accessibility, it's time to implement, and it's also still time to keep researching the cutting edge of the next layer of technologies coming, including across the healthcare field, which is so critical as people age. So for every aspect of your work, you have an opportunity to make sure that you're using these solutions. And particularly, you may want to think about it in terms of the implement now side of things, ensure policies are in place throughout the field, use an end-to-end project management approach, ensure the training's available where needed, and then also ensure support for future research and standard efforts in a multi-stakeholder fora. Getting the different stakeholder groups together produces the best consensus solutions in our experience in this very dynamic and challenging field of the web, and continuing to promote awareness and further research where needed. Thank you for your time.